Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Jeff Campbell, president at aiCommerce, a global digital marketing agency with a focus on e-commerce and retail marketplaces. Thanks for joining me today, Jeff.
Oh, thanks, Glenn. Good to be here.
Well, Jeff, you have a powerful early career highlight in that you supported the worldwide launch of the original Apple iPhone. That's amazing. Can you share more on how that came about and maybe some of the lessons that you've learned from that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a wild one in my career. Apple was a client of mine back in 2006, and I was leading the digital media supporting iTunes and iPods and rest in peace and iPhones, and really a focus on paid search and SEO, and really extremely lean on the client side at Apple. Our main client was in charge of the worldwide launch of the first iPhone and then the subsequent models. What an organization, right? Extremely secretive, project code names, details not shared with partners until public launches. I remember going to their marketing offices. There were no windows, full escorts, NDA upon NDA. But the lessons I learned with the years of working with Apple were strong. I think the biggest one is the importance of branding versus online ROI. I've been a digital marketer for 25 years. Data is king. Looking at return on ad spend and ROI is clutch. But that was a client that was really into branding. And it shouldn't surprise me that they brought kind of their offline and traditional media psyche over to the digital marketing, but it was about ranking number one. That was their goal. It wasn't about ROAS and CPCs and conversion rates. It was about number one. And again, makes sense because they wanted the best billboards in the United States and the world. They wanted to be the first commercial of every commercial pod. They wanted to be on the inside front cover, the back cover of the magazine, never in the middle. So, not surprising that they were focused on brand. And again, look where they are today. So it seemed to work. But even in SEO, I remember having a conversation that went all the way up to Steve, which was, at the time, everybody searched for laptops, not MacBooks. MacBooks weren't really a household name. People didn't know what it was. So I'm making suggestions to change some title tags and some website verbiage and use laptops. And boy, that was a no-no. They wanted the brand of MacBooks and only MacBooks. I'm like, what about a page of like laptops versus MacBooks and why they're different so we can start ranking on some of those keywords? No. But again, really good to see the branding, and I think that really worked for them. And probably a great lesson for many marketers, as we'll talk about today, the balance of branding with direct response and ROI.
Oh, that's fantastic! What an outstanding career experience. That's going to stick with you for years and years. So, thanks for sharing that background. I appreciate that. Now, when you and I chatted in the past, you've mentioned that you can't automate everything in marketing, and that marketing professionals, we have to strike this balance between people, process, and technology. So can you just expand a little bit more on what you mean by that, and how does that balance come about?
Yeah, absolutely. You certainly need all three to succeed in marketing and digital marketing: people, process, and technology. Our industry changes so quickly. We weren't talking about TikTok or GoPuff last year, 2 years ago, right? But to succeed, that fundamental experience, both the people and the process of targeting, so thinking keywords, audiences, interests, and then the optimization techniques, the bids, the budgets, the ROAS, the QA process, they're fundamentally similar, the same, but then each platform is going to have some nuances, right? And they're going to need unique process and unique technology. Second, many worry about us, the marketers, the optimizers, the hands-on keyboards being replaced by technology or AI. Just not really the case. I see it as an enabler, right? It enhances our work to allow us to focus on higher value tasks, right? And those age-old marketing questions of how do you balance brand awareness with direct response, websites versus Amazon sales, how do you drive offline sales with online marketing? As new platforms emerge and there's more pieces to that marketing pie, what pie pieces are going to shrink, and how should that overall pie grow? That's something that is going to take some human gut intuition and experience versus technology. And I've used tools like market holdout testing and MTA, multi-touch attribution, and media mix modeling, which directionally help, right? But those all look backwards. I mean, here we are now where gas prices are at an all-time high, and that's probably hurting people's or limiting people's visits to different physical stores. Those models and technology couldn't have really planned for that. And if more consumer dollars are going to gas, how's that going to affect sales for your business? Again, there's some technology that's going to help, but you're always going to have that balance of people, process, and technology to make these smart decisions in marketing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting comment that you bring about, gas and then the impact on consumer and consumer spend and share of wallet. That is fascinating. And you mentioned a moment ago Amazon, and there's something that I remember when we chatted before that I thought was fascinating, because you shared with me that 74% of consumers conduct product research on Amazon versus conducting that originally on Google. So with Amazon being such a large search engine now for product information, et cetera, how do you then recommend that marketers balance this conflicting goal of I want to stay visible on Amazon, and I want high conversion rates, or but maybe I receive less information about my buyer because Amazon is holding that information back. But I also want to expand my company's standalone presence on my own e-commerce site, but maybe I have lower conversion rate, but I have more first-party data about my buyers. So this is an interesting conundrum that I think, businesses are in right now, particularly with, Amazon. But this consumer piece, it's a fascinating balance. So how do you recommend that you balance these two?
Right, and that's definitely a multi-million-dollar question there, but you're correct. According to Jungle Scout, 74% of consumer product searches now start on Amazon. That's got to be shocking and keep a lot of Google executives up at night. But as you mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, there's only so many marketing and advertising dollars to go around. So you have to be pretty strict and clear with your long-term and your short-term goals, right? And you mentioned a lot of those right before. And Amazon and marketplaces are for instant gratification, for immediate sales, right? Instant gratification of revenue and ROAS, return on ad spend. But unlike your website, you lack control to respond to reviews or have a relationship with customers, right? Lifetime value, repeat purchases, cross-selling, those are all extremely difficult with marketplaces because you don't have that relationship. And that may be more important to you as you launch your brand and build awareness. Again, going back to that Apple example, versus having that immediate sale tomorrow. Further, Amazon, is almost built against the overnight millionaire, right? They want to have a good customer experience, and they want to make sure that people that are using their marketplaces can fulfill and delight customers. So Amazon can take 6 to 8 months and maybe $100,000 of an investment, just as if you were to open up a retail storefront down the road. That investment is required before you got their flywheel spinning through proven customer satisfaction, the trusted fulfillment and inventory supply, quality reviews, and most importantly, a strong velocity of sales. So, there's some important considerations. You need to think about if you're building an omni-channel brand, or are you just trying to drive sales quantity with a low-cost item? And that's really just some of the initial KPIs you need to think about when making some of these decisions. But there's pros and cons to both for sure, and big considerations. But no doubt, the old saying, fish where the fish are, it seems to be Amazon now. That's where the consumers are headed first.
Yeah, that's really fascinating information. But staying on this topic of Amazon, what I find is fascinating is how, the experience that we have, particularly, within business, that the experience that we have as a consumer, for example, Amazon's one click, the how easy and streamlined it is, 1 day shipping, etc. These experiences about how easy or frictionless it is to use a site like Amazon, how that consumer experience then spills over into our B2B buying experience as well. And therefore our own experiences and expectations have increased on how an interaction with a B2B company should be in their own day-to-day work life. So can you share a little bit more about how should we look at this phenomenon, and and what advice can you give to marketing operations professionals on how we should approach this experiential comparison between the B2C life and a B2B life?
Yes, yeah. So in terms of Amazon, they do have a B2B portal. So you can create a free account at business.amazon.com, and it offers quantity discounts and price comparisons and more. And as a business, you can promote your business profile and use some of the keyword targeting, but it is a little limited in terms of if I just want to focus on B2B consumers or people that are logged in their B2B account. But I would assume that's coming shortly. Off Amazon, B2B buyers are typically using personal emails to log into social media and more, so it's very difficult to target them on those platforms outside of using cookies, which we know are going away, and some interest targeting or some contextual targeting. And then in search, consumers and business purchasers really search the same way with the same keywords. It's very difficult to distinguish. I worked with Lowe's for many years, and we'd always joke that the search for paint, people, the consumers or businesses search for paint rollers, right? They don't search for massive amount of paint rollers for my business of painting houses. I wish they would, right? It would have made it a lot easier. So you'd have to take an approach, in that case, you'd have Lowe's.com and you'd have Lowe'sForPros.com, probably both needing to be bidding in the paid mix and ideally optimized for the organic mix for those different types of consumers that again are searching the same keywords. And then finally, the advice is LinkedIn, remains probably the best place for targeting titles, people at certain companies, etc. But their CPCs are very high, double, triple some of the other platforms I mentioned. And because of that long B2B sales cycle, it's very difficult to measure that success or that ROI. But again, that's probably your best targeting option for the world of B2B. So more options are coming. I think we're kind of wait and see to see if Amazon can really go hard into this B2B space, but they are certainly rolling out a platform and improving it pretty quick.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Now, as the president of aiCommerce, you're responsible for obviously business operations across, everything: client services, digital activation, finance, sales, obviously marketing. So can you share some of the best lessons that you've learned about how you instill a culture and expectation for growth and scalability across so many diverse internal teams?
Absolutely. So my previous agency, a couple of us started it. We grew it to about 800 in the US and thousands globally. So scalability is something that's always in my mind. And some of my team, I'm sure, gets a little frustrated when they're doing something for the first time, and I'm like, you need a formal process, and you need to really get the logos on there, make it beautiful, professional, and reusable. But that's got to be a big focus for scale in this place. But my role is to help my team achieve great outcomes for clients and their teams and themselves. And probably the biggest way I do that and achieve a culture is through transparency and just the definition of success, right? Ensuring my team knows what it is and how to achieve it. Specifically, shared and published goals. I love the OKR philosophy, the objectives and key results, the John Doerr book. If you haven't read it, or read read a quick excerpt or watch the video on how Google does it on YouTube. And so from OKRs and understanding the company goals to team goals to individual goals and the connectivity, all the way to like profitability bonuses. Everybody at the company should be rewarded as we're making money, in my opinion. So I think that helps a lot. And then hiring, smart people and never forgetting the people, process, technology. But the people is really our biggest cost and what makes us successful. So to quote Hamilton, young, hungry, and scrappy, right? Resourceful and action-oriented folks. And I think those smart people will build the culture with you and for you. And it's worked so far in a couple different forms.
That's excellent. I want to just kind of dig in there a little bit because the one thing that I hear as you were describing that is alignment. And that everybody's sort of rowing in the same direction. But also you mentioned process. And can you dig in on that process a little bit more about, what are some of the things that you've seen about what makes, building a culture for, scalability and how you create a process around that?
Right. I mean, you hire an agency for, again, those three things: people, process, and technology. And from a process standpoint, knowing that we've been there and done it before really is going to make somebody more successful. I mentioned TikTok or GoPuff earlier. You can fumble your way through it. You as an individual can log into their interface and probably make some mistakes and mess with some things, and you'll probably figure it out. Way more efficient to hire a third party that's done it before. But again, if that third party doesn't have a process that makes it more scalable, and you're just dealing with some new individual who actually hasn't run campaigns on that platform or doesn't have best practices or doesn't have formats or the training, you might as well do it yourself, right? So that's just so crucial for our business to come in and really be that resource and be reliable in performance. And again, giving clients that head start because we have worked out some kinks. We have found the best technology, right? We have found the best ad types and ad types to avoid. So we're not spending their money on learning as they might themselves directly.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. Let's stay on advertising there for a little bit. I remember reading something that you had published in the past about the importance for e-commerce marketers to calculate a break-even ROAS or return on ad spend, and you encouraged marketers to understand their contribution margin and to utilize margin-based bidding to maximize revenue at break-even contribution margin levels through algorithms and optimizations, et cetera. So can you just unpack that a little bit and then share if or even how those approaches can be used in potentially non-e-commerce marketing environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So simply put, not every sale is a good sale, and that's so important. And so many marketers will chase the sale without understanding kind of the profitability or the margin of that sale, what it took to get that sale, and then maybe even the lifetime value of that sale. Most sellers also don't know why they gave you a ROAS goal, right? So again, 20 years of doing this, hey, go hit a $6 ROAS. Well, why $6? Like, okay, but tell me how'd you get to that? And usually it's, well, we've been at $5 and we want it better. Well, okay, have you done the analysis to understand what your cost of goods sold are? Do you understand maybe there's some commissions for Amazon, maybe cost of keeping your website up? Have you baked in all of those variable costs to understand what your contribution margin is and therefore what your ROAS goal is? Because you might find out it's $3 and over $3 you're breaking even. So by having a $6 goal, you might be leaving revenue and sales on the table because you're trying to be overly efficient, which you might not need to do, right? So that's so important. And then online or offline, looking at the variable cost, the marketing dollars, the promotions, making sure that you understand what variable contribution margin is and you stay margin positive. And that's, again, up to that seller or client, in my case, on the strategy of how high they want to go. Many startups are very happy with a low single digit, contribution margin or variable contribution margin because they want to invest in growth. Other more storied companies might need to be in the profit stage. So 10-20% is what they aim for. So again, going back to that marketing pie and all the pieces of where you can put your money, that's something that's so crucial to understand, whether offline or online. All those costs that go into the cost of the goods that are sold, but also into the selling costs, shipping, fulfillment, and more, to really understand what your break even is, and then look at your channels. If immediate sales is your goal, which ones are going to be the most profitable, and then maybe which ones have scale with a small profitability. So that's I think crucial. And again, going back to not every sale is a good sale. It's important to do the math.
Yeah, well, and also to your point, important to understand the timing and also the maturity of the product, and or ultimately the strategy that what is the most important for you right now. So I think that's great. Another thing that I read that you had written, and I actually wrote this down because I thought this was really powerful. You wrote a common pitfall for most e-commerce first brands is over focusing on advertising at the product level at the expense of lower converting upper funnel ad types. Product advertising is an important part of the mix, but shouldn't represent the entire mix. Successful companies will build a brand, cross-sell, and measure lifetime value. So you've talked a lot about brand. We started today's episode talking about the importance of brand with Apple. So can you share just some more background about the brand building and how that can again apply to both e-commerce first and non-e-commerce brands?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's somewhat crazy, but the disruptors are becoming disrupted, right? While many of the established brands were late to the game, they've now adopted these direct-to-consumer practices, and they're actually representing more of the growth in the category than the digitally native brands, right? So the successful sellers on Amazon, or to be successful on Amazon, you probably need three things. One is a very strong differentiator that makes sense, right? Second is a known brand that has qualities that you'll pay up for. Or third, the lowest price. So these traditional brands or established brands certainly are well known, and people are willing to pay up for them. And the supply chain, from gas prices to COVID lockdowns, is tightening up. But the majority of Amazon sellers in the last year, I think upwards of 70%, are China-based. So they're taking out some of the middlemen, and they're beating some people on price by quite a bit. So where do you fit in that? And I think that's so important. So these digitally native brands need to scale, right? So what worked in the past to kind of get them where they are have now become crowded and expensive. They're not working like they used to. Social media, which is really the primary channel where most consumers are encountering brands, connected TV, influencers, and then not being overly data driven are the keys to future success. And again, that's really the playbook of the traditional brands, where they've been doing TV and billboards and built that brand. And some of these digitally native brands need to take advantage of that. And again, the non-e-commerce brands need to continue, if they aren't already, going toward the D2C practices like Amazon, and thinking about online sales versus omni-channel for a segment of their business.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to remember that line. Disruptors are now being disrupted.
Yes,
that's excellent. So, would you say is there a strategy that e-commerce brands are using today that you disagree with?
Yeah, I'll give you two. One I hit on pretty hard was generic ROAS goals, right? Not a client comes in really in my history that hasn't given me a goal that wasn't justified, or the math didn't lead them there. It was based on past performance or some financial goals, but not like mathematically driven. So that's the first. The second is doing what they did on probably Google and Facebook and many others, and that's having different silos between organic and advertising, or kind of the paid performance on Amazon. And Amazon's very different. A couple years ago, I was managing $1 billion with Google in annual spend, top three of their clients in spend. And I would call them and say, hey, could you help me out a little bit on the organic side? We're spending a lot of money. And they would slam the door, hang up the phone. And good for them, separation of church and state. Amazon, polar opposite. The more you spend on Amazon, the better your organic rankings get. So while your paid ads might have a bad ROAS, the more you spend, your organic rankings are actually growing. So you need to look at like the total performance of Amazon, and that's going to give you that true ROI, that total ROAS, if you will, across those channels. And again, very new to the traditional digital marketers, if there's such a thing now. I've been doing this for 10 years. Because of Google, there was that separation. How much you spent did not help your organic rankings. Those days have changed. And so that's another common mistake I see of a lot of e-com folks, is they're looking at the silo of advertising and not thinking about the impact on organic, or taking advantage, or looking at the profit that it's driving on the organic side and factoring that into ROI.
So in a sense, it's almost an XY axis, where the more that you're spending, you have to find sort of the sweet spot between, how much you're spending versus what the organic benefit is that you're gaining from that, the revenue that you're gaining from the organic compared to the revenue that you're gaining from the paid, and in trying to map that sort of perfect sweet spot. Is that a way to think of it? Yeah.
It's a new formula where ROAS was sales divided by cost. Now it's ad sales plus organic sales divided by ad cost. And that's really what marketers need to be looking at in the world of Amazon. And it works inversely. If you cut your budget by 50%, you will see organic rankings go down as well. Kind of, crazy to see. But I mean, if you're Amazon, they want somebody that's going to take advantage of all their different ad platforms and programs and ad types, their promotions, their different ways to connect in social and more, and they're going to reward you by taking advantage of that because they feel it makes a better customer experience, and maybe help somebody get to space. But that is the rules we're playing by now.
Mm-hmm. That's a great example. Are there other examples of something that an e-commerce brand is not doing that you would recommend?
It's probably the over-reliance on ROAS. So I realize I'm talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth, but you need to build a brand, and that's what I said, is the disruptors are being disrupted. Take 15% of your ad budget and say, hey, I'm not going to overly focus on data and ROAS and return, and I'm going to experiment in connected TV and building my brand and talking about the attributes. That's an area where I think it's probably harder. You get hooked on those sales, and again, the endless supply of sales with Amazon, which just continues to grow every year. It's tough to kind of get off that crack and say, hey, we need to think long term and build a brand versus just continue to focus on single product searches and advertising there.
Sure. Well, Jeff, before we wrap up today's episode, what is the main takeaway that you would like to leave our audience with in understanding the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
Yeah, so I'll repeat myself a bit. Not every sale is a good sale. Understand your cost of goods sold, your margin, and your break-even points. And that's going to allow marketers to be the most effective with their media dollars and their partner selections.
Excellent. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff. And until next time, stay safe, take care, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Glenn.